Peace be with you. I'm making this video today to talk a little bit about faith versus knowledge or science. Science being what we know and what we can prove, and faith being what we suspect or what we think is the truth. So I want to start a little bit by saying that what do we know about us? We know that we're made from dirt. We know exactly like God says in the Quran that we're made from dirt. We know for a fact that we're made from mud. God says that He created us from mud, water, and dirt. And that is exactly what the human body is. Human body is about 60% water, and the rest is literally dirt. That's why we turn to dirt when we die. We turn to dirt because we are dirt. Everything around us is literally dirt, formed dirt. So when our mothers are pregnant with us, the tomato they eat from the garden, that is literally created from dirt. It's just processed dirt. That's why you put dirt on it so it would grow. Nothing that we eat, consume, nothing that we are created from or put together from is independent of the dirt that we live on, of the earth. So we are exactly what God says we are, dirt. So that is science. We know that. We know that for a fact. Okay? What isn't science? Science is what you know, what you can prove. What it isn't is what you think you know, or the conclusions you're making from limited evidence. And this is very important to talk about because in our society, for example, I'll use the evolutionary theory as an example. Not that I care if it's true or not. Whether God created us in a slow process or God created us all at once, it doesn't matter to me. What I'm trying to say is the evolutionary principle is not science, is masquerading as science. And I understand people will say, oh, how can you believe that? This is just another religious radical, and oh my God, the church thought that the earth was flat, and so on. And I agree with that. The church did think that the earth was flat, but people are not understanding that part of history correctly. So what they are thinking about when they talk about that part of history is they're thinking about the church is wrong. What they are not understanding is what is wrong is that the whole so-called scientific community at that time, all the learned people, were essentially part of the church because church held all the power and held all the books, right? So there was not a lot of room for dissension. So once the people who held the knowledge claimed that something was true, dissension was not tolerated. And this is exactly what is happening with the theory of evolution. It isn't that I'm saying this because I'm a religious radical and that's why I'm wrong. It is because the people who believe in it blindly are radicals and they impede the progress of science, which is actually questioning everything you think you know. Because they believe that we are certain. They believe that the evolutionary principle or evolutionary theory is science, where it's not even close to that being. There's so many holes in this theory that it would be ridiculous just to take it as face value. Just so I'm going to talk about it a little bit, just because I want to point out the questions that are unanswered and the shortcomings in this train of thought. And then I'll kind of address it a little bit. And I'm just using this as an example because it is important to understand once and for all the question about what you think you know and what you actually know. To understand the difference between faith and knowledge, faith and science. Because some things are based on faith. But all I'm saying is we should not represent faith as knowledge. So, talking a little bit about evolutionary principle. Number one, the principle itself does not hold when you go all the way back to the primordial ooze or back to synthetic organic chemistry. There is no reaction that will undergo, that kind of a process. And if you're talking about prolonged time, these types of chemical reactions, whoever took organic chemistry in college will know that some of these reactions you have to stop them. And not only that, your product degrades over time. You don't get more of it with time. It degrades with time. So There is no time limit on this. Actually, time works against synthetic organic chemistry. So if you're thinking that some sort of primordial ooze got hit by lightning, and all of a sudden cells started to form, or at least the amino acids started arranging in the correct sequences, that's just garbage. It's impossible. And don't take my word for it. There's plenty of actual PhD or synthetic organics chemists, and you can watch their lectures on YouTube that will say the same thing. So if you ignore that and you go, to the actual organism that exists, which how, without creation itself, it can't exist because synthetic organic chemistry doesn't work like that. It's not random. Anyways, so now they say that, you know, the creation itself, we know that we change over time. Yes, we do know that we adapt to our environment. Adaptation is science. We know we adapt to our environment. We know that bacteria adapt to their environment. That's why antibiotic resistance is emerging. We know that if we send our astronauts to the space station, that their bones decay and they become osteoporotic because they're not using them. They're just adapting to their environment. Except they don't grow wings, they don't grow gills, they don't grow anything that they didn't have before. They just adapt within certain parameters. So you're not going to have a fish that crawls out, or you're not going to have a human being. If we all get flooded, you're not going to have a human being creating gills or developing gills. You're going to have lungs no matter what. You may increase your lung capacity. You may be able to stay submerged for longer periods of time, but it's all going to be within certain parameters, and you're never going to be able to breathe water no matter what, even if after 10 millions of years. Another thing is another thing is time. So evolution isn't measured in time, it is measured in generations. So we know that, for example, we have observed E. coli that has a generational span of about 30 minutes. We have observed it for over 100 years, and E. coli stayed E. coli over that number of generations. Now, you're talking about millions of generations. And now and this is a single unicellular organisms. Now, if you take multicellular organisms and you give them the same number of generations, you're talking billions of years. And we know that a unicellular organism will not evolve over that period of time, will not speciate, will not change. It will adapt, but will not change. It will still stay a bacteria. It will still stay E. coli. To assume that a multicellular organism is going to somehow speciate is ridiculous. And then people will say, well, look, man, E. coli and human beings have the same genetic code, right? They have a lot of similarity in their genetic code. Chimps and humans have almost 98% of same genetic code. That's proof of evolution. That's proof that we all came from the same source. Actually, we did come from the same source. God created us all. But you got to think about what is the genetic code. What is DNA? DNA is a blueprint. So most of the blueprint is for the actual cell and its function. It's not for the organism. So if I take a car and a house, their blueprint is going to be mostly the same once you account that I have to, if I write everything down. So if I tell you how to mine the metal, how to create the glass, the process of creating glass, the process of creating plastic, the process of creating rubber, the process of creating, where to find the wood, how to cut the wood down, all of that. Most of your instructions are going to be exactly the same for both. Only a small part is going to be different because a car is a car and a house is a house. They do not, they do not trace back one to another. What they are is the instructions of basic processes of how to build this thing from the beginning. It would be useless to you if I tell you how to build a car if you never knew how to mine metal, if you never knew how to process metal, if you never knew how to make glass, if you never knew these basics. So it would be useless for me to give you the blueprints for the car when you have none of the basic knowledge. And this is what most of our genetic code is the basic knowledge for the actual cell. The arrangement of them and the phenotype that it creates is a very small portion of this. The cell itself is infinitely more complex than we are as an organism. I mean, another thing with evolutionary principle is that if you really think about it, it is moving the wrong way. How so? Well, if when we look for organisms in outer space, we're not looking for human beings or animal on Mars. What we're looking for is evidence of cells. We're looking for unicellular organisms because they are most fit for survival. Even now, we have extremophiles here on Earth. So these things can survive in all kinds of environments. They can survive in freaking volcanic water. They can survive under the water. They are most fit for survival. And evolution deals with survival fitness. What evolution implies is whatever happens to make you more likely to survive, you are more likely to pass on your genetic material, and you are more likely to exist afterwards. Your posterity is more likely to exist afterwards. Well, the greatest likelihood of survival is if you are a unicellular organism. So there is no reason that a unicellular organism would evolve into a weaker form of life ever. And we see over all the generations of E. coli that we've been monitoring that that's not happening. And then for a multicellular organism, that is even more unlikely. The next thing is the complexity or interchangeability or interdependability of organ systems. Once you move past a certain amount of cells, certain volume of cells, you can no longer acquire nutrition through diffusion. At that point, you have to have mechanisms to acquire. Generally, these are blood vessels in most of our organisms. Some organisms have endolymph or whatever that's called. But the cells that are not in contact with the outside environment, they have to be bathed in nutritious fluid, and fluid for organisms that live on oxygen-rich fluid as well. So, for that to happen, you have to have cardiovascular system. So you have to have a pump that drives this fluid to all the cells. Then you have to have an oxygen exchanger, which is the lungs. If you have blood and a cardiovascular system and a gas exchange system, then you have to have a nutrition acquiring system. So this is your GI tract. Then you have to have something that signals that food is abundant and then all the cells can eat, which is insulin. So you need a pancreas, which needs to sense things. So you need a nervous system. These things don't happen independently. They have to happen all at the same time. You don't just evolve an organ that you did not have before. It is impossible. You're going to evolve a pancreas when you never had one, then how did you exist without one? Because right now we can't exist without it. If you don't make insulin, you die. You have type 1 diabetes and you die. Yeah, now we can synthesize insulin, thank God. But before, if you had that, you would die. And you're just dead. So you don't have independent organ evolution over time. And if that's the claim people make, then if you are having goal-oriented evolution, then what you're saying is the cells are alive. They know what you need, so they create that. If you're talking about goal-oriented evolution, then you don't exist. The cells exist. Then you're just along for the ride because they make all the decisions. If they thought that they needed a pancreas and they needed to synthesize insulin, and that's why it became a reality, then you don't exist. You're not you. These cells are alive without you, and as a matter of fact, they are alive without us. We don't control 90% of the functions of our body. We're literally just steering the car and existing in a mental state, in a spirit state, and just driving the car along. The cells do all the functions for us. The autonomic nervous system does most of our bodily functions for us. Even tells us when we're thirsty. Our thirst is not even our own will. Body senses that we need water, that our salt fluid balance is off, so it tells us. How does it tell us? It makes us thirsty. And when you are thirsty, you don't control that. You're just thirsty. You know you want to drink. So you don't even have control over that. I don't have control over that. So these are just a few criticisms of what we call science of evolutionary theory. It bothers me that it's being taught as a fact. That's why I made this video, And it's not just about evolution. It's not that I want to say, hey, creationism and this or that. You know what? Again, I'll say it again. Whether God created us slowly through a slow process or all at once, it's irrelevant to me. That's not what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is that the theory of evolution, for example, is not science. It is not representative of a fact. We don't know this. There's plenty of questions. There are plenty of holes in this type of approach. So it is faith. So people who don't want us, what bothers me is that the people who don't want us to believe in God, they're presenting themselves as they have knowledge, and they're using the word science as a ringer for us to think, hey, that this is proven. We know this for a fact, when in fact we don't know it for a fact. And this is what I've learned. You know, now that I am in this stage in life and I hold a medical degree, I realize that this is you know, I finally understand the difference between proof and conjecture. And evolutionary principle is conjecture. And I will be demonized for this because I don't subscribe to a mass opinion that evolution is proof. And I just explained for 10 minutes why I don't think it's proof. But people are demonized for this exactly in a way that people who said that Earth is not flat are demonized. So even that lesson of history, it has not been learned correctly, because the evolution, you know, questioning things that have questions is science. So this stance, although I am a religious person, is a scientific stance. It's not a religious stance. From a religious standpoint, like I said, God created us from dirt. We know that for a fact. The next thing is, you're talking about being created in pairs. Almost everything on this planet has a male and a female. Almost every multicellular organism. And you're talking about that something that happens by random mutation is going to create a male and a female, or a chicken and the egg, or a uterus. These things that are interdependent. You know, God says in the Quran, have you considered the seed? Did you create it, or did we create it? We didn't create the seed. It comes included with our body when we are born. God says, I created you in pairs. Random mutations don't happen in pairs. You know, you're talking about things that happen slowly over millions of years. That these things don't happen in pairs. God tells us, you know, consider the water. Is it you that drops it down from the cloud, or is it we that drops it down from the cloud? And we could make it salty if we wanted to. Then you will lament. Then you would cry out. We have rivers floating up in the sky over us, literal lakes and rivers, and we get that water. God tells us, you know, consider the fire. Is it you that creates the trees for it, or did we create it? We didn't figure anything out. We know that we exist. We know that we are created from mud, and that's it. That's all we really know. We think we know, but we don't. And the pretentiousness of knowledge, presenting conjecture as knowledge, is what bothers me more than anything in this world. And most people, including myself, at some point in their life fall victim to it because of the processes we undertake to get to certain levels of education. And I just wanted to say, don't believe everything you hear. Questioning is science, and you have the right to question whatever you want. Evolution is faith. The theory of evolution, if you believe it on faith. You don't believe it on science. And the same thing is for faith, for religion. So that's it. That's a little bit longer video than I wanted it to be, but that's really what needs to be understood. I want people to think about, you know, what is proof and what is faith, because a lot of times we're misled about that. So that's all. I just used evolution as an example. There's plenty more topics that I could have used, but that one is kind of easy to explain. So that's all.